a playlist original.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Live or die. Make your choice.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
I'm not even gonna swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
They're here.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face, the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your host Gaius and Jackson. This is still considered our Tales of Horror episodes, but it's a little different this week. No guest, and we're not talking about a specific movie, but we just wanted to switch it up and just have a general like horror chat discussion about the genre in general, whether it's filmmakers or tropes or like anything that had to do with the genre that we wanted to kind of talk about. We thought about maybe having guests for this one, but it was, it's fine to have like a break. I think this kind of discussion works better with just the two of us. But we will be back to having guests next week when we bring the movies back. But I think we just kind of miss just having each other
for
a second.
And coincidentally, by the time this drops, it'll be right in between September, October. So it kind of separates the months a little bit. And you're right. We've had a lot of guests on lately. We will have a lot more guests on as we get into October, and a lot of more specific discussions about particular movies coming down the pipe. So yeah, I think this is just a great little nudge in the middle of all the different content that we've been putting out there and just getting back to sort of the basic format, but while keeping it in the spirit of spooky season and horror movies and whatnot. And,
Right.
I don't know about you, because we didn't chat too much off screen here, but it's been a great week movie watching, like horror stuff for me personally, and just so happy to be back in the swing of things, like especially as September has gotten later into the month and we're, the leaves are turning color around here, the temperature's dropping, like it's just really feeling like fall now. And I'm just so in the spirit. It's great starting to see some decorations go up, like Halloween stuff. So yeah, it's full horror movie swing for me right now. But what did you get the chance to catch up on over the last week?
Well, I have to agree. It's getting that way too over here. People are throwing up their decoration. I've never decorated for Halloween or spooky season,
really,
but a lot of the places near us are doing it already, which is good. And
it's fairly early, but yeah,
it's really early, yeah. And then on top of that, I always like once I start seeing commercials for like AMC's like Fear Fest and like other stuff on TV, like even though we started ours pretty early. We started like early September, but it officially starts for like TV and other stuff where they start like marathoning. I mean, I don't need to marathon the Halloween movies on AMC, but it is kind of cool when you're like flicking by to still catch them on TV rather than like popping them in. It just feels different.
Definitely.
But yeah, I love when like those channels are doing that. And like, I guess a lot of like, I think Friday the 13th got added to HBO Max. So there's like a lot of all those movies are there now for people to watch. Everyone seems to be getting excited to watch different horror films, and I've tried to mix it up. Like it's been a mix of stuff we need to watch for this,
right?
And then things I just want to watch, and then when some of those things I just want to watch, I'm like, God, that would have been great to talk about.
I felt the same way.
But like we said, we can't talk
cram
about
it all in
movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, even in 2 months, I thought we could get a lot in 2 months, but the weeks fly by, and then you have to dedicate it to one movie. And I know there's been times where we're record like 2 to kind of get a couple more movies in. But
Right.
even then, there's just too many choices.
That only gives us like 10 or 11 movies across those 2 months if we do a single movie every week, which really isn't that much in terms of horror. I mean, it is when that's all we're talking about, but you're right. It's just a drop in the bucket. So I've been feeling your pain of like, I watched like The Thing, for instance. I was like, man, as lauded as that movie is, and like I'm sure many people will cover it for spooky season, I'm like, it would have been nice to have a conversation about it, but
yeah,
oh well. Like there's lots of other stuff to cover. But what did you get in that you watched for Gaius versus like stuff that you like prescribed viewing?
So one of them wasn't a full movie. I forgot because we did Urban Legend last week, and that episode has gotten really good reception, and I got to thank Zach Cherry too, because he shared it across his channels as well. And I actually got a message from another podcast. They shared it on Twitter, and like
saw that,
and like talked about that being another good episode. And I think it was good too. I was kind of wondering because like both our Cabin Fever episode and our Urban Legend episode were finished by playlist pretty much at the same time, and I was like, all right, well, which one do we drop first? And I was like, should I drop Urban Legend like on the day of the anniversary? But I think it was good that it came out like a few days before, because it got some traction already, and then yesterday, which was like the official 25th anniversary, it got shared a lot on social media and stuff. So I think it was good that we kind of spread it, had it come out a few days earlier, and then also let it kind of have that day to for other fans to maybe listen to. If they want to listen to a few different takes on it, they got to. So that was cool. But I watched that. There's a documentary on the Blu-ray that I thought I had watched when I got the Blu-ray, but I guess I didn't. And it's about an hour and a half dedicated to the movie. And it's horror documentaries like this are so interesting because you look at Urban Legend, or maybe people look at it and they're like, oh, it's just like some random late 90s horror film. And the people that made it though, and to talk about how successful it was when it came out, like they really felt like they were making something special. So it's always different when the people involved are talking about like the ins and outs of like what it was like to make it.
Totally.
And they got everyone, just about everybody except for Jared Leto was on the documentary.
Was he just over it? I guess too big.
You know what? They didn't even acknowledge him in that way. They did say that he wasn't bad to work with. Rebecca Gayheart had talked about how they had worked together before, and he was actually one of the guys in one of her Noxzema commercials. And she told a story about how like when they met on set, he was like, "Oh, don't tell anyone I was like in those commercials." And she was like, "Okay." And that was like the first thing that she did. She said when she got on set was tell everyone that they were in that together. They talked about some of the stuff that we talked about on the episode too. Like Robert Englund said that Rebecca Gayheart's the best thing about the movie, and he stands by that today. And she fought hard for that role. They had to make sure that she was right, because like we said when we were talking about it, that it could easily be too campy and not work. And she found the right kind of balance, I guess, for
Definitely.
them. And I think while watching it, I mean, you had some issues with the movie, but like overall, like what she did probably was
I had no issues with her.
It.
Exactly. Yeah, no. When she turned the crazy up, that's when I really found the movie flourished. And she was a lot of fun to watch on screen, especially. I mean, I liked her throughout, but definitely once we kind of see where her character goes, for those maybe that haven't seen it yet, she dials it up to 10, and it's fantastic. That's cool, though. I am really guilty and bad with watching special features on Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff. I should really make an effort to do more of that.
So I like when they're updated, like kind of documentaries on the movies. Like the Blu-ray also has like a vintage like featurette for when the movie came out, and I find it hard to watch those because it's like there's nothing new you're learning for something that was released in '98. And but sometimes they did record a new audio commentary for it. I didn't listen to that, but I'm sure that's good too. They have that's the director and one of the editors and a production designer that works on it.
That would be cool. Very insightful.
But yeah, they talked about how I didn't know this either. I wish I would have mentioned it when we recorded, but Sylvia Horta, who wrote the movie, I had no idea he had passed away. I mean, pretty tragically too in 2020.
Recently.
He struggled a lot with depression and addiction, I guess, and he ended up sadly killing himself in 2020. But he's on that Blu-ray, and Urban Legend was his first like big pitch in Hollywood, and one of those kind of rare success stories where like one of your first pitches gets accepted, and then and they and it was just the right time because they were like every studio wanted their Scream, like they wanted
right.
a slasher movie, and it was just good timing for him. And Phoenix Pictures, they're the ones that ultimately distributed it. They said to this day it is Phoenix Pictures' most profitable movie. And they they talked a little bit about the sequel. They said they kind of misstepped on that, but that first movie they thought was really special, and they don't think it's a Scream clone. And I kind of
as per I saw like a clip, the thumbnail of your piece that you'd written about the movie. I haven't had the chance to read it yet, but I would love to. I saw that, so that's pretty cool. I'm excited for that read. You are a very great writer.
Well, thank you very much. And so I watched that, and then I watched because we talked about Valentine on the episode. I watched that right after watching that documentary, and I usually watch Valentine, like of course around Valentine's Day. There's always the ones like movies that kind of
for those that maybe don't know. Is it My Bloody Valentine?
No, it's so Jamie Blanks, who directed Urban Legend, directed a movie. It came out like in the early 2000s, so this is like towards the end of like the slasher movie boom.
Right.
But it Denise Richards is in it, Marley Shelton, David Boreanaz, Katherine Heigl's in the opening scene. Pretty decent cast, and it's very like slick and nice to look at. A lot of pretty people are in it. When I first saw it in theaters, I didn't love it, and I think because that my love for the slasher movies even then was like waning a little bit. Right. But like in the years since, it kind of has developed a kind of a cult following, and it's fun for what it is. And I still maintain that it's one of those ones that had another big Blu-ray reissue with a documentary on it. I didn't watch the documentary, but I watched the movie again. It's just a fun slasher movie, and I enjoyed it.
Admission time, the entire last episode, when it was it you and Zach talking about Valentine? I literally thought you were just abbreviating My Bloody Valentine.
My Bloody Valentine.
I literally did not clue into that until right now. So I'm like, and I hadn't seen that either, which is why I wouldn't have gotten not understanding what you're talking about in the movie. So that is funny. That's exactly what I thought you were talking about.
Cliff Notes version, this kid gets picked on at a school dance, at a Valentine's school dance. Like all these like stuck up girls like make his life miserable at this Valentine's Day dance. Years later, these girls are all grown up, and someone wearing a Cupid like cherub mask is going around like kind of killing them off one by one. And then we have to figure out who if it actually is Jeremy, who was the kid at the beginning, or is it someone else that is it's very much like it has like I don't know if you ever saw Prom Night in the 80s. It's a slash movie with Jamie Lee Curtis.
I was gonna say Prom Night and Carrie.
It feels very reminiscent of that, where it's the whole like we did this awful thing when we were kids, and now it's like coming back to haunt us. And it really, if you look at it now and like look at it from the lens of like it really is like an homage to 80s slasher movies. I like that much better in that regard.
I've seen the 2008 remake, but I don't remember anything about it. I'm sure.
Prom the remake. The only in name only, because it's not even the same like plot.
Oh really? Oh okay. In name only. I love. That's awesome.
I saw that on opening night when it came out, and there's some good horror remakes, and then there's some shitty ones, and that's one of the shitty ones.
Right.
I kept it going with more slasher movies, and I watched Sorority Row after maybe a day or two after Valentine.
Okay, that one doesn't ring any bells for me myself.
Okay. Sorority Row is a remake of House of Sorority Row that came out in the 70s. They made it into more of a slasher movie where there's this like big sorority party with all these sorority girls. They like this girl, they fake drugging one of the girls as a prank.
Great.
The guy and one of the boyfriend of the girl is involved in said prank and think that she is dying. So they take her to these like bluffs or whatever to like keep the prank going. And they're like, all right, we're going to end it. We're going to let him know that this is all a joke. And he's so paranoid that he's going to get caught for drugging her. He kills her for real, like on the bluffs. And then it's one of those like, which is why I probably watch it again, those kind of that story of like, oh my god, we have to hide this thing, and then like they dump her body, and then a year later, of course, these girls are being like hunt down by the costumes get more and more ridiculous. It's almost like this kind of like sorority kind of robe hoodie thing to cover the killer's face. And she got killed with like a tire iron. He like shoved it through her chest.
Oh my
and
God.
the weapon for the killer is like a tricked out like tire iron with like blades on the end of it. And
Okay.
and I'm not saying that this movie is like particularly like really really good, but it's fun.
But it can be, yeah,
And
you can have cheesy Halloween slasher movies that so enjoy.
and there's like the girls do a really good job. I mean, like the cast isn't like totally well known, but they all play, you know, various forms of like bitchy sorority girl really well.
Right.
And
Okay.
with the exception of one who's like, you know, the one that felt really bad. Of course, there's always the lead that's like,
Yes.
oh, what we have to come clean. And then there's like the uber bitchy one that's like, no, fuck that. It's been a year. Why do we need to come clean?
Right.
But it's there's some really cool freaking deaths. I want to tell you one, but it's probably best if you ever saw it to like see it for yourself. But there is some really good over the top.
Would I eat it up?
Yeah, you would eat it up because you like gore. And
Exactly.
and
That's what I'm thinking.
it's really gore. Now the movie flopped like crazy when it came out in theaters, but it's another one once it came out on like Blu-ray and stuff that found its own life, and some people like it more than the original. It's very different from the original, but yeah, it's like again one of those kind of movies that it's interesting when they come out. Like I saw that in theaters too. Barely anyone in our theater, but at this point, this is I forget when it came out. I think mid 2000s, and that kind of horror movie was not as popular anymore. The slasher movie was kind of dead again, and it had been taken over by like you know torture porn and
the new
found footage, all
that.
that's and all that. But it was trying to hop on the remake train too, but it kind of hopped on late. And it's also it's a remake of a like horror fans, real like big horror fans know House of Sorority Row, but it's not like a entirely well known.
That had gone over my head. Maybe if I've heard the title before and I'd forgotten, I'm not sure, but I couldn't have told you a thing about it. That's pretty niche. I'd love to hear that.
Yep. And then I watched I'm just telling you, I watched The Fog. I watch it the start of every kind of spooky season. I was telling you offline. I don't know why I don't save it more until like October, but it is like a good, like kind of little creepy start to it because it's like old school like ghost story and like the atmosphere and mood of that movie is so good. I know John Carpenter has issues with it, even though I think a lot of his fans have grown to really like it, and
I really
think it's
enjoyed
one
it
of
when
his
I saw it
better
for the first
movies.
time. Yeah.
I know he has some issues with, you know, like he felt it wasn't scary enough, and like, you know, he did punch up some scenes later with like a few more kills from the ghosts and all that, like and like were sprinkled in the movie. But I love that it's not particularly scary, but it's like kind of unsettling. Like you kind of feel the vibe of like that town, like what Antonio Bay is like, and then what it kind of would be like on a night like that. Once like all the scenes towards the climax where the fog is like rolling in across the entire town is like genuinely really creepy. I thought all that stuff was definitely really good. And also thought it's really interesting and cool. Like the lead, basically Adrienne Barbeau, is like isolated from the rest of the cast. Like she's basically has to like warn them from the radio station, like where to go, and like warn them like where the fog, like the fog is moving, like due east, like don't like go this way, go that way. I thought that was really interesting too. That, you know, when you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, she doesn't really have scenes with everyone else, just her son earlier in the movie,
right? Yeah,
and
and then the climax, right?
And then you have the climax, and then Jamie Lee Curtis, you know, she only agreed to do the Fox. She did Halloween, and it was a big deal for her. And there was hopes of her becoming a movie star after that, and she didn't get any movies after Halloween. She got a lot of TV shows, and John Carpenter was like, "Well, hey, like I'm doing this. Do you want to do it?" And she was like, "She hadn't done another movie since Halloween," so she did it. Well. And you know, of course, it started a train of like, you know, it's The Fog, and I think Prom Night, Terror Train, Halloween 2 for her after that.
Okay.
That's how she solidified her status as like a scream queen, pretty much.
The scream queen.
But she's plastered all over the key art and poster for The Fog, and you know, she's not the lead in it. I mean, she has a decent sized part, and it is cool that her mom's in it. Like they share like not like scenes together where they're interacting, but they're in the same group scenes together.
I didn't know they were in a movie together before H2O. Yeah,
Janet Leigh is like, I think, the mayor or something of the town, and she actually has most of Janet Leigh's scenes are actually with Nancy Loomis, who plays Annie in Halloween. She plays Laurie's best friend,
right?
So like all of her scenes are with her, basically. But it's a really fun mixed match kind of cast, and it's just interesting. Like Tommy Atkins is cool in it too. Like it's a really fun movie and I think it deserves a lot more credit than maybe Carpenter himself even gives it. But I mean, I guess you would be more like critical of your work.
Certainly, yeah. And he pumped that out in between Halloween and The Thing, right? Is that 1980 that the
Yeah,
comes
it's
out?
in the so it's after it's after Halloween. So there's a lot of pressure, right, to like live up to what Halloween was. And I think the decision to make another scary movie was they were like, okay, we should do that because we have that momentum of making a scary movie.
Right.
I mean, yeah, he proved with The Thing, right, that he's not a one-trick pony. He can make another frightening movie in a
would
different
continue
genre,
to prove that after The Thing too.
Right. There's no secret. You love it too, but you're more of a Thing over Halloween.
Exactly.
But like,
yeah.
I mean, I think Halloween is like kind of lightning the bottle. I think. I mean, it's very unique in its approach, and like I think the way him approaching in a way where he's like, I'm not making a franchise. This is just a single one. I mean, of course, it became that later, but like,
but not his vision, right?
His idea of Michael Myers isn't, he's not Laurie Strode's brother. He's not this and that. This is just a random guy who committed this crime when he was like a young kid because he's evil and he's evil personified. That's it. He only chooses to go after Laurie when she drops off the key at the house. He sees her, he fixates on her, and then that's it. There's no other plot points other than like, new prey, and that's all. So like that's scarier to me than like, oh well, he's her brother, or the other sequels where they're like, oh, there's like this like cult and curse, and like when the stars do this on Halloween, like this happens. Like that's all stupid. I just rather it be like random. And I think
does that come from Season of the Witch? That stuff?
No. So Season of the Witch is like the third one. It has nothing to do with Michael Myers at all. It's like they were trying to make like an anthology. After Halloween 2, they were like, we don't want to do Michael Myers anymore. We'll just make anthology Halloween movies. We'll keep the title and just change that, the plot every year. And that didn't work out because everyone was like, we've had 2 movies with Michael Myers, and what is this? So it flopped.
Right.
Now, Season of the Witch today has a much better reputation, like far removed from when it came out. But the whole cult Thorn Halloween thing starts in Halloween 5 a little bit, and then really is the major plot point of Halloween 6, and it's really
I see.
But yeah, when you look at stuff like The Fog, though, it's like, man, like don't be so hard on yourself. Like that movie is good in a different way than Halloween. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's one of the greatest horror films ever made, but like if your intention was to create like an old school classic ghost story, I think he did a good job of doing
exactly. And the hallmark of any Carpenter film is it's very atmospheric, and that's like it's the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about The Fog. Like I've only seen it once a couple of years ago now, but I'm going to throw that in, I think, my rewatch calendar for October, along with a couple other Carpenters, because I'm just riding that Carpenter high right now. I got 3 of his movies in this week. And he's one of my favorite horror directors, and there's a couple of movies of his that I'm due for a rewatch for. So I figured, why not? They weren't even necessarily on my radar until I just noticed I had just watched a bunch of his movies this week, but I figured, why not? And then Halloween will be coming down the pipeline later. So I figured that's just another notch in the belt. May as well just continue it. But I started the week off, and I guess before I get into that, did you see anything else of note?
No, that was
well. Still, you were busy. That's like what, 4 watches?
Well, I did see A Haunting in Venice, and there's not a lot to go into on that.
Right.
I will say, you were like, hey, I wonder how much the supernatural angle is a part of the movie.
Yeah.
Wrong? It's like kind of bait and switch, but they use it pretty well. I will say that like you get the impression that it could be
okay,
and but we had to like the books are set in like a real world kind of setting.
I see. Okay.
So, but they did utilize it well, and I actually think, despite not having like the biggest like name ensemble cast compared to like Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, I thought this group was better. I liked it more than Death on the Nile. I still think Murder on the Orient Express is my favorite of the 3.
Okay.
So far. Tina Fey was amazing. I had no idea Tina Fey was going to be good in this. It didn't seem like a Tina Fey like kind of role.
No.
But then once she started doing it and what the part is, because she's a very like kind of fast talking like novelist. She's like basically writing like mystery novels and stuff. Okay. And she fit the part really well. She's like probably one of the standouts. And Jamie Dornan was really good too. Outside of the 50 Shades of Grey movies, the guy is very good actor as well. So and then of course Kelly Brown was amazing. He knows that part like the back of his hand.
Yeah, exactly. He was born for that. I feel like Jamie Dornan is just like this generation's like Robert Pattinson Twilight era. You know what I mean? Like that's what the 50 Shades of Grey were for him.
It's funny that they're friends. They're like
right on.
They all kind of like when they're becoming actors, they all kind of like roomed and together. Him, Jamie Dornan, Andrew Garfield, they all know each other. They have this like little British.
Cool.
Almost feels like a real British fraternity.
I always forget Andrew Garfield is British, but yeah, totally.
Yeah. But yeah, that was it for me. What about? I know you had a Carpenter
marathon, basically a mini one in a really exactly in a really weird order. I pretty much almost worked backwards in terms of like releases, but I'd never seen Prince of Darkness before. For those that haven't seen it or maybe have seen it and don't realize, it's like the middle movie of his. I don't know who coined this, if this is something that fans have kind of made or if Carpenter had this intention when he was making these movies, but he has like this apocalypse trilogy, as I'm sure that you're aware of, which began with The Thing, and then 1987 he does Prince of Darkness, and then is it 94 he does In the Mouth of Madness?
In Mouth of Madness,
yeah, which I had seen for the first time last year, but I'd never seen Prince of Darkness, and I was like, okay, well, I got to get that in. And Cam had gotten me the DVD, I think for my birthday this year. So I popped that in one night, not really knowing what to expect. I think I've seen reviews and stuff of it before, and it's Carpenter, who was like one of my favorites. That movie floored me. I loved every minute of that movie. It was awesome. It took a minute to really get its nails into me, and then once things started kind of unraveling, I was like hooked to that movie. I really, really enjoyed it. It'll probably be one of those ones I rewatch a few times in a short time span just to really like cement.
Yeah,
but that was a really, really cool John Carpenter first time watch, of which I have a few, and some, like I mentioned, I will be, adding to those rewatches this spooky season. And then after that, so I had plans this week. I don't know if I'd mentioned in one of the last episodes that we had filmed, or if I had just told you this offline, but I had my buddy Tyler, in the off chance he's listening, shout out to him. He watched Halloween for the first time, and he's like, was I telling you about this?
Yeah, I think so.
So he shit on Halloween, and like, don't if you knew Tyler, it's hilarious. Like, I would never expect him to like Halloween. Like, that's very older for movies, for a guy that like, he likes movies and all, but like that's a little bit out of his comfort zone, I'm imagining. So he probably went into it as you'd expect, didn't really find, wasn't his cup of tea. So I was like, we've had a conversation where I was like explaining to him like the legacy of it and how impactful of a horror movie it is, and trying to get him to reconcile with the age, and it's not like a modern horror movie, but blah 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 blah. But he's kind of inspired me to kind of like use Letterboxd a little bit more frequently. So I've been documenting my watches there and looking at his reviews of stuff, because he logs his watches pretty religiously. And he had heard a lot of The Thing, and just reached out and wanted to see it. And because I think during our Halloween conversation, I must have gone on a rabbit hole about John Carpenter and how good The Thing was and all that jazz. So he came over and we watched The Thing, and there were multiple times I'd look over after like a particularly like jaw-dropping effect scene, and I could just tell he was really enjoying it. He very much enjoyed that movie, which was great. Like, there was a couple times he was like, dude, that was fucking awesome. And I just put a smile on my face. You can never watch The Thing too many times. I think that's probably the movie I've seen the most now.
Granddaddy of practical effects, I think.
And like, I'd seen it last year. I'd shown another friend for the first time that movie, and I'm sure I had seen it the year before, if not a couple of years. So it's been I've seen it a lot in the last few years, and it just never gets old. Hard to say if it's not one of my top 3 favorite movies, I think, still. But what have you seen more between that, Halloween or The Thing, or is it clear one or the other?
Halloween for sure. I mean, it's more. I mean, I like The Thing a lot, and I actually like it with each viewing.
Right? Yeah, me too.
More and more. Halloween's just more my bag. I mean, I like sci-fi horror a bit, but Halloween is definitely more up my alley. But I've seen that more for sure. But I do respect. I mean, most people I know either are like Halloween, and then The Thing is on its heels, or it's The Thing and like Halloween is on its heels.
Usually the
two Carpenters, and then after that it's like a mismatch of like the third, fourth, fifth movies are like flip flop as well, depending on
definitely. But those two are titans of Carpenter's filmography without a doubt.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, it's got me wondering if I want to rewatch the 2011 prequel reboot sort of thing. Not necessarily a reboot.
I think what I remembered, I liked it.
I liked it. It's a shame that it goes the CGI route.
And that wasn't the plan at first. I think they screened it. They screened it, and they were like, "Oh, this needs more like effects." And then like the director was actually pretty upset that they CGI'd a lot of it. But I think that's another one that like years later people were like, oh, like once they were like, I think it wasn't made clear at first when it was coming out that it was a prequel per se, and like they were like, oh, this is a remake, whatever.
Right.
Of course, when you saw it, you knew it was a prequel, but I think in the marketing leading up to it,
it wasn't clear.
You know, it wasn't clear, but it's definitely not as good as that movie.
No, but it is.
And if we're talking about offshoots of Carpenter horror films, it's better than, I mean, whatever. It's better than Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween. I'll throw that out there.
Okay,
and it's way better than that Fog remake. The Fog remake is awful.
I meant to bring that up when you were talking about the Fog, that it was victim to the remake years later, the 2000s remake.
Where
syndrome,
like
right?
every studio was like, what did we haven't remade yet?
Right.
That was like part of that.
That's a shame. I don't know if I've ever seen the remake like as a kid or not. I was just confused, or like I was kind of like not sure about the Mist and the Fog, if they were remakes of each other, if they were the same thing, or blah blah blah. I obviously come to realize now the difference, but it wasn't until recently I knew that John Carpenter had done the original, but that is definitely going in my rewatches. But after The Thing, I mean, I won't spend any more time talking about it. There's nothing new to be said about that movie. But I rewatched for the second time Christine, which I think he did right after The Thing. So shout out to our boy Stephen King, one of the better adaptations of his work, I think, up there for sure. That was just another great little treat. Just way more profane than I remember it being. There's a lot of like, I guess, foul language in that movie, which I always just enjoy. I just find it grounds a movie more because this is how people like talk. Not particularly gory. Not that I can remember anyway, but still
not by any means. Yeah, I don't think so.
No, not really. Not but just a atmospheric John Carpenter movie. I love what he does with Stephen King's work. I feel like those guys just really bounce well off each other. And I honestly think, like, I'm sure it's more apparent in the novel, which I've never read. But first of all, have you seen Christine? I'm sure.
I have seen it. Yeah.
When was the last time you've seen that? Yeah.
Like years, I think.
Really solid
rewatch. I would say 10.
Oh goodness! Wow,
it's been that long.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. But I'm sure it's more apparent in the novel how, like, and for those, I'm sure a lot of people like realize it's like the movie where the car is alive and kills people. But I thought the movie this time around anyway was so much more ambiguous as to whether it was actually alive or if because it does a good job of like not showing you the interior during the scenes where it's like chasing people down and like being alive. And I kind of found myself wondering, like, is Arnie, like the main character, actually the one being possessed and taking revenge on the bullies and killing people with the vehicle, or is it Christine really alive? I thought it was just cool to ponder. I'm sure there's that's interesting. I think another more analytical watch could probably provide a definite answer, but I found myself watching being like, I think there's enough room in here to kind of see both sides. But great ending too. I don't know if you recall. One of my favorite Carpenter endings where Christine is all in the junkyard, all bunched up in a cube of metal and steel, and as the characters walk away, you just see the piece bending. It's just a really cool touch to the end. But so that was my Carpenter marathon.
By the way, that movie turns 40 December 9th. So
in December?
Yeah, weird.
Really weird.
So you might be able to have a more analytical watch and discussion about it if you want down below.
True. And I guess that it takes place over like I think a 6-month period and ends around New Year's, like in terms of like the plot of the movie. So that's interesting.
And filmed in and around various areas of Los Angeles and in some places like an hour out from here. So it's like a lot of its locations
neat. Okay. A lot of his movies are filmed over by you.
Yeah, Halloween 2. They after Halloween 2, they took them out. Like Halloween 4 and 5 are in Utah.
What?
Weird. Weird. Yeah, they filmed there. I think Halloween 6 might be there too. And then I love the like Halloween 2, and that's at least what I love about the first Halloween 2 is even though it is supposed to be like a small town like Illinois, the places that they picked in and around LA feel that way. But like if you were to walk around the corner, you'd be like, oh, that looks very much like Los Angeles. So it's just cool what people get in their small little we just need this street right here. Like,
and you'd never know. It could be anywhere in middle America.
Right, exactly.
But so definitely Halloween is coming down the pipeline, like the movie. So that'll be another Carpenter watch. And then I'm sure I'd really like to get in the Mouth of Madness in this again this year, just because I don't remember a lot of it. I saw it the one time, and it'd be nice to just get all of his Apocalypse trilogy in like a month or two. It'd be neat. And The Fog, you've definitely put that on my radar too to rewatch that because that's just such a seminal Carpenter movie.
Yeah, and
but,
I got that in 4K. It looks great.
Oh, I bet it does. Especially the nighttime sequences with the fog rolling in would look great.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's crazy how that looks better. Like that came out 80, I think.
Yeah.
And it looks better than anything they did in the remake. Like the remake's fog is like it's a lot, and you're like, but it doesn't. It looks like it was made from a machine, or like with like, or maybe like enhanced with like CGI as well.
Right.
And like what they did in this is so much better.
And the same can be said exactly about The Thing as well, which is just a testament to his craft. But all this to say, especially after this week, like I have to give him like the credit for being one of, if not, I would say my favorite horror director. And that's like a person who's like directed not exclusively horror movies, but maybe is known for them. But
yeah,
it wanted me to ask you what your favorite, who your favorite horror director would be. Like someone who hasn't just dabbled once or twice, but is like kind of known for directing horror movies. Like, does anybody come to mind for you? Because I think my answer is solidified with Carpenter these days.
I go back and forth on this because I feel like it should be Carpenter because of Halloween.
There's no right or wrong answer.
But I've always leaned more towards Wes Craven over Carpenter, and my
I don't blame you one bit.
My reason for that is I think there aren't a lot of horror directors. I'm trying to think of anyone else that
writes and directs.
And well, in the same way that Wes Craven did it, where Wes Craven had like the 70s, 80s, and 90s where he kind of reinvented, or at least made these like very seminal like horror films that kind of defined the genre. So in the 70s, he does Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes. And in the 80s, he does A Nightmare on Elm Street. And then, of course, in the 90s, he does Scream. And then that reinvigorates his career where he does the sequel to Scream, is even more successful. And he kept that going. He was able to do like something like Red Eye because of the success of Scream. Like he was able to kind of keep his career going. And
that was
I don't know if a lot of
later in his career.
Yeah. And I don't know if a lot of other horror directors have done that really. I mean, like Carpenter had success in the, of course, late 70s with Halloween and then the 80s, and his output in the 80s is probably better than Wes Craven's because Wes Craven did A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then of course there was just like Shocker, which isn't great, and like a few other movies in the 80s that aren't great. But then like Carpenter, once you get into the 90s after In the Mouth of Madness, it's like,
yeah, it's definitely not his best decade by any means. No.
Yeah, and that is like my gripe with Carpenter. I mean, I think Vampires was his last movie for a while, a theatrical movie that Carpenter did with James Woods, and that wasn't really good. But I think Wes Craven actually was able to, like I said, like, yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, you think about all the rest of them, like, Tobe Hooper did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then there's a big debate about who did he direct Poltergeist or did, or did Steven Spielberg direct Poltergeist. You have Romero with like the Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead stuff, and I think for some people that might be true for them, that he might be a favorite, but I'm not really a huge fan of like zombie movies. It just depends. It has to be like something unique, I guess, and special to it.
I love Romero, but the zombie genre I feel like is kind of a one-trick pony. It's really hard to innovate. Harder to innovate, I guess, in that genre of movies than others, but I still respect him as, the granddaddy of zombie. But I'm with you totally. I agree. Not my favorite genre by any means. But he is a great. I really like his The Crazies as well. It's kind of like an underrated.
That's a good remake too, by the way.
Yeah, I love that remake.
When they did it right. Yeah, that was
that's a
solid,
great remake. Yeah,
I don't think people talk about it enough in the sense of like, oh, that's a really good one.
That would have been a good one for us to cover too, man. Damn it! Yeah, but I've seen it like 12 times, like literally so many times. Yeah,
but it's good. But I think Craven overall, like I was bummed when Wes Craven passed away. That was that
sucked.
Tough one, and but everyone that worked with him said that he was like a really nice guy. And I think the biggest misconception is that because he made all these very scary movies that he might be a weirdo, and he wasn't. He just kind of believed that horror movies kind of like exercise these kind of like feelings that you might have. These kind of like they allow you to like let go of this kind of like whatever anxiety it is because it's fake. It's not real. You get to kind of like have these emotions and like let them go. And that's why he loved horror movies so much. I think he directed like Music of the Heart, which wasn't a horror film with Meryl Streep, but
okay.
she got an Oscar nomination for that, so he directed her to an Oscar nomination. And like I said, all his movies aren't great. There, there's Vampire in Brooklyn with Eddie Murphy is not good.
Oh God, but
then you look at like even with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, like that comes out in '94, and he's doing the whole meta movie within the movie thing before Scream does it, especially with Scream 2. And like, that was like everyone now is like, oh, like he was already kind of without even realizing it, commenting on the effects of cinema on like the people that watch it and then the creators of it. Like when you look at Wes Craven's New Nightmare, that part of the story where like something that he created on the page became so evil that it became real. And that is what that became like the conceit of the movie now. And now it's not about this guy that's haunting you in your nightmares. It's like, this fiction that we wrote, it has taken on a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
And not only and now it's also affecting the people who were a part of it. So like for Heather Langenkamp, it's affecting her son. And then, it's not really affecting, like, it's interesting how what Robert Englund's role in that, because he is very much normal. He's an actor, but there's also this fine line you can tell with some of his scenes too, where it seems like it's consuming him, because he's like, there's that one scene where he's like kind of painting the portrait of Freddy, and like you can tell that he's thinking about Freddy too. And I just thought it was just an interesting idea about how like that kind of cinema might affect the people who work on it. And that was just a smart idea. I mean, it wasn't. I think people were like resistant to it at the time because it wasn't like a typical Nightmare on Elm Street
mainstream. No, even just a movie concept in general. Like he was very much ahead of his time in terms of like the meta approach to his content. When you say, I want to just backtrack for a second. You say you flip flopped a lot. Did you mean between Wes Craven and John Carpenter?
And Carpenter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
And it's because of Halloween. It's like, it's Halloween.
Yeah. Right.
And Halloween's like not only one of my, not my favorite, it's my favorite horror movie, but it's also one of my favorite movies, like top
definitely
5. So like it's
okay.
I mean, like, so he like, he made the granddaddy of horror movies for me, but like it's also consistency, and like his early stuff is good. So like, it's just that it wanes as it goes on. But also Wes Craven has that too in a lot of ways. But I think the movies that he put out that I think that fans would consider classics stand out a lot. Like,
agreed.
People love the Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left. I Nightmare on Elm Street is up there with some of the greatest horror movies for a lot of people.
One of my favorite horror movies, easily top 5.
And then he brought the horror genre back with Scream with the help of Kevin Williamson. So I mean, that is a big deal, I think.
Yeah.
So that's why
I think that's a great answer. Wes Craven, yeah.
But Carpenter's a good choice though. Like Halloween. I mean,
for me too, it's like I've seen more Carpenter movies than Wes Craven movies. So that's a factor. And I think I like my Carpenter movies more than I like my Wes Craven movies. But I mean, there's, again, like any opinion with art, like that changes over time and your relationship with those movies. Yeah, exactly. But I've been meaning to see The Hills Have Eyes for a long time. It's one of those seminal Wes Craven movies I have not seen yet. So I got to get that watch in.
I think the remake is of both of those movies, Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes, is technically a better film because those two movies are a product of their time. So like it's very much low budget 70s horror movie, almost like Last House on the Left almost like it looks like a film almost, like that's how cheap it looks. And but that also gives it some of its like power though, is that it feels real and like a little bit grimy and gross. And that's the same thing with The Hills Have Eyes. But what the remakes do, there's like all those key scenes in Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes that the remakes had to be tasked with recreating, and I think they do them very well. Where it
plays to the advantage, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's also. I mean, I remember we saw The Hills Have Eyes, and once they attack the motorhome and like shit gets real, like people started walking out, and so that's it. So that's it gets pretty aggressive, like it gets really brutal.
It's a sign of a lot of good horror movies.
Yeah.
Walkouts.
But that blueprint starts with Wes Craven though. So yeah. So that's why he's tops for me. But I would love to. I might put the question out there for other people who are their favorite horror movie directors. like of all time, might be, give you an option to choose one. I know it'd be easier to be like, well, this person, that person, but we want you to narrow it down to like one. So we'll put a poll up or a question up and see which one you give us. I think we're gonna get a lot of Carpenter, Craven. I think a lot of Romero,
right?
Too.
I mean, that's a good trifecta right there.
And it's so crazy too when you talk about like the people that have like the one-offs, like not really
Kubrick
necessarily one-offs.
Comes to mind.
And then like Clive Barker with Hellraiser. I mean, it's not really like a one-off for him, but like that's what he's really known for, right? So like, it's interesting when there's people like that where it's like, oh, well, you made a really good one though, like a really like,
and like I would associate him as a horror, like that's what he is associated with.
Right.
But like, for instance, Stanley Kubrick having done The Shining, like that's definitely, as much as that's one of the greatest horror movies ever and one of his greatest, he's by no means a horror director, just a director that's done a horror movie. So there's a little bit of a word play there, but Clive Barker and Hellraiser, which
I mean, and then you think about like Bob Clark, who directed the original Black Christmas. I mean, like I think that is his only true horror movie on his resume. And Black Christmas came out like before Halloween, and like it has a lot of the same. The whole like POV of the killer, not really seeing the killer, a lot of like hidden stuff like in it. That predates Halloween. And it's actually, there's certain scenes in Black Christmas that are really scary, the way they're like framed and like set up. But I think after that he did like Porky's. He did God, why am I blanking on the Christmas movie where the kid gets his tongue stuck on the
my gosh, A Christmas Story?
A Christmas Story. He did that too. He directed that.
Oh wow.
So there's always like these directors that have like one, like you never did it again. So I just
interesting,
really. But yeah, since we're naming people who like consistently went to the horror movie well, and it's Craven for me. But Carpenter is a respectful answer as well.
No wrong answers either.
I want to cut into this with a little bit of news that's kind of related to John Carpenter. Because it starts with something he created. Halloween Ends came out last year, and that was the end of the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy. The marketing was all about the final battle between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers. That was supposed to be the end. But even when they were promoting Halloween Ends, like they were like, "Hey, it's out of our hands. Out of this third movie, I'm sure they will go back and make another one." Here's what's going on now. It says that Miramax is looking to the future with the Halloween franchise, and they are actively shopping the rights around Hollywood. They said at the moment there's a huge bidding war going on right now with several different parties interested in vying to resurrect Michael Myers once again. Miramax is open to both film and television projects, and they're currently taking offers from studios and streamers. After that story got released, they said that Paramount seems to be the one that's ahead, and now Paramount has Scream. So I understand why they want Halloween. And then Malik Akkad, whose father was Mustafa Akkad, who put up a lot of the money on the original Halloween. What he wants, in addition to a movie, he would like a 6-episode television series that uses the focus of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, like something that focuses on that story, which would be a really good get for those fans of that particular Halloween. Here's the deal. I looked at Twitter, social media yesterday. There are a lot of people who were stoked that Halloween's coming back. There were some people that are like, can we put it to rest for a little bit longer? Or can it just be done? I know.
Yeah, that's where I fall for sure.
But today I was like, you know what? I get all that, but I was like, I still love that this franchise is viable enough that it is still at the subject of a bidding war where someone wants it and they think that there is still something to be made from it. This is something that a lot of the bigger ones that from back in the day don't have right now. Like Friday the 13th has not so much anymore, but was wrapped up in like legal litigation for a really long time. A Nightmare on Elm Street hasn't done anything since its remake as well. And Halloween has still been going on. Has been like trucking along and making money and still being relevant. So I do like that. I just don't know what direction I wanted to take. I don't know if I want a TV show. I mean, the idea of a TV show and like
it's different. So I like
being set in Haddonfield and having like 13, like even if it's not like what Malika Khan wants, even if it was a Michael Myers story of like 13 episodes dealing with different people, not Laurie Strode. Some people were pitching, like random fans were pitching like a Smith's Grove like prequel series that shows like Dr. Loomis like at the hospital and all that stuff and like different patients, and that leads into like the Michael Myers stuff. What we've kind of learned though is that some people don't like Halloween without Michael Myers, so that's a big thing. He is the face of it,
synonymous with that word.
There's also people like Danielle Harris. We've talked about her before. She was Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 4 and 5. She also was Annie in the Halloween remake and its sequel. She's a fan favorite amongst the horror fans. She's not like a mainstream favorite, so she's not like a Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, if you were to ask like a regular person, like, do you know who Danielle Harris is? They're like, no. But if you were to ask a horror fan, they'd be like, oh, little girl from Halloween 4 and 5. And they love her. Like, she is, amongst horror circles, she's considered a very popular final girl, even though she was young when she made those movies. She would love to come back and continue Jamie's story as an adult. I know there are some fans that would want to see that, but I don't think it's mainstream enough for them to do that idea.
And you're kind of pigeonholing yourself a little bit too by going down that route.
Right. So there's this whole debate of like, do you go to the past? Do you do something new? What do you do with it? It's happening no matter what. I mean, I have no feelings one way or another about Paramount getting it. Some people were pitching A24. A24 would be great, but I think it'd be too expensive for them to acquire it. Even though A24 is doing really well, they're not like. And you know how much like the Exorcist trilogy was for Universal to acquire? It was $400 million, and I don't think A24 has. It's that also extra just amount of money.
Not their DNA. Like, they are an indie studio. They don't produce IP of this magnitude. Like, the Halloween would be, I think, too big for A24's britches and just very different from their formula. So honestly, as much as I would love to see what they would do, I just don't think that's a good match. I have mixed feelings about Paramount. Although it depends on who the showrunner is and what execs they get to oversee that project. But for instance, like, they really dropped the ball with the Halo show for me. I'm a massive Halo fan growing up, was a huge fan of the game, still am. Yeah. And that show was an abomination as far as I'm concerned. And what they did,
that's what I heard.
Just amazing IP that they could have done so many great things with. Like, I think they have with Halloween. So if it does go to Paramount, I'm like, they have massive redemption to do. So that would freak me out. I'm also just in the camp of like, I don't necessarily, especially after what I took away from Kills, and I haven't seen Ends, but this will be the year I watch it. I just want a little bit of a break from Michael Myers, and it got me thinking, like, he's really the only character in his own league, really, where we don't have any other characters that have been on screen so consistently for 50 years, do we? Like,
no, I mean, I think so. They were kind of running neck and neck for a bit through the late 70s, 80s, but I think that momentum with Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, they've died anything. Off. Right? They haven't released anything since their remakes, and this been 12 movies I think for Halloween, and the character of Michael Myers. That's why I mean that you're right, has gone through the 70s. 80s, 90s.
That's almost three generations of people. Like, my grandparents didn't know what Halloween was. My parents do.
And everyone knows who he is. So, like,
exactly,
from people our age, older to little kids, are at least aware of who Michael Myers is. At least the image.
Exactly, you would see the face and you would know, oh, he's a scary guy with a knife that kills people on Halloween, even if you couldn't name him. So, like, at what point, where does that lid come on top? Like, is this Michael Myers just a character that goes on like forever? Like, is he just? Where does that? Do we just never stop making Halloween movies? Like, that's kind of what makes series special.
He's not like a ghost face where it's like, oh, there's a different guy under that.
Exactly.
Now they could. Here's the deal: they could, and they might piss people off. This is what happens with Halloween Ends, because like it. Yeah, I mean, you were told kind of what.
Yeah, I know what happens. That's right. Yeah.
So like, some people like that, and I didn't hate that idea. Like I said, I think you're gonna throw chairs, but I didn't hate it when I saw it. It was like. I like, because John Carpenter, I guess back in the day, he hinted at the idea of like that kind of evil is it kind of infects the town. It infects like, individuals. Right. And that's kind of like what that movie was trying to say, that it's not just in Michael Myers, it can be in someone else. Now that the problem with doing something like that so late in the game is like, well, this is what I'm used to. So I don't want that. That's what most fans were thinking when they saw Ends. Like, I don't want some random kid basically doing most of it. Right. And it's not Michael Myers. Like, it's not just because he's wearing like the jumpsuit and the mask. I know it's not Michael Myers underneath there, so it's not the same. So I get it. So maybe that route won't work either. So you're right. I don't know. Like, the Michael Myers that we get in these projects will be probably the Michael Myers that we know, and then there's there's no real. I mean, I don't think you
Yeah.
don't do Laurie Strode anymore. I mean, even if you don't get, I
No.
mean, Jamie Lee Curtis is never coming back, right? But like, even if you're gonna, I even wouldn't even go like the remake route of like what Zombie did. I wouldn't even have another Laurie Strode. I wouldn't have another actress playing her. I would just
I would keep
dumb.
Michael though. Yeah,
I
like
keep
your idea
Michael.
with the Smith Grove prequel. I think that would be pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that's
Maybe
kind of cool. And I actually don't mind the Jamie Lloyd thing, but I like Halloween
Mhm.
4 and I like Danielle Harris. So
Yeah,
I was like the one good thing that Rob Zombie, or one of the good things. I'm a little easier on the 2007 remake than I was, but one of the good things that he did was really realize that Danielle Harris was a fan favorite amongst horror fans and cast her in that remake.
That was a great, yeah.
And she was very grateful because, she felt some kind of way about being left out of H2O. And like they gave Laurie a son, not a daughter. And then I know it was mentioned on H2O by, I forgot who it was on when we talked about it, that added insult to injury when they did the 2018 movie and gave her a daughter. And then like, they were like, they didn't even use Danielle Harris. It wasn't even like, at least with like H2O, they were like, oh, it was a son. But no, in the new one, they were like, no, we gave you another kid who's a girl, not the girl that's in these other movies. So I get she cares about the franchise too. I don't think it is just about her wanting to get another job. I think she's very nice to fans at conventions. Like she is aware of, that made her popular and famous on some in those circles.
Right.
So, but I really don't know what I want. I mean, I like the idea that like these major studios and streamers are fighting over it because it's like, wow, it's still
exciting that
like,
that there could be new stuff and we don't know what direction they're going to go in. I'll admit that's exciting.
Right. And I don't mind Paramount. The only ball they dropped with Scream was like how they handled Neve Campbell and her money. But like as far as bringing Scream back, I think they did the best they could with and I think overall that return worked. Even if you have issues with 5 and 6, I think they got it back into the mainstream. Both movies made money. They both were critically well loved too. They weren't flops in any regard at all. So Halloween might be a good home. I wouldn't want it at Warner Brothers
I don't think I want it at Paramount.
And I don't want it at 20th Fox because that's too Disney adjacent. I don't want it there.
No. I don't want anywhere near Disney.
Sony. I mean, they used to make Sony had Screen Gems, which used to make like kind of like the horror remakes back in the day, and that was
right. But they've made some shitters too.
Lionsgate is an interesting one that could be a good place for it. I think Paramount has more like money behind
capital,
to really. But this is all very early news. I don't know what I want from it. I don't know what I need.
It's exciting time though, kind of. Yeah, I'm exciting and nervous, and I also just hope whatever they develop takes a few years to get off the ground. It would be nice to have a breather.
And I hope I hope that they're taking their time with like whoever is bidding on it and what they're pitching them. Like they really just take the time to be like, all right, what will work best for the future of the franchise? I know a lot of people were confused yesterday because they thought Universal had the rights, but like Miramax made a pact for those 3 movies with Blumhouse and Universal with David Gordon Green to make those 3, and then the rights would then revert back to Miramax.
Oh, okay,
and they could sell them, and then they can sell them.
Okay,
and they can sell it to whoever wants to make the movies or TV show or whatever they're doing next. I guess the good thing about that franchise is that it's not wrapped up in legal mumbo jumbo. It's like free to like fly wherever it wants to go.
It's a free agent. That is nice.
And then all the granddaddy horror franchises, like it's still trucking along. I mean, and still making money. So there's that. I just don't know what I want from it. I mean, it's too early, but I think it's cool that
something to follow though for sure. I know I'm definitely leaning towards a miniseries. I would like a really small 6 or 8 episode miniseries would be really good for that, and something we haven't seen yet. So a movie is just, we already have 12. Like, what are you gonna do in this one that we haven't seen yet?
What would you do to reinvent the wheel? Like, I mean,
right?
It'd be hard.
It would be hard.
I would be interested in like if it is a movie, like what director they would pick and like I guess say what you want about David Gordon Green, but in the beginning with 2018, I was just the thing I was most impressed by when I first saw that movie was just the look of it and how close it was to 78 as in terms of like the overall style and feel of it compared to like all the other sequels. So like I thought he did a good job with that, and that even came down to like getting the mask, like because that's a hard thing to get right apparently for these movies, and like David Gordon Green did that right. Now I know people feel their way about kills and ends.
I liked
I think
2018. So I'm
I
with
think
you.
kills. I think kills is fun and like
Kills has its
we probably
moments
should
and it
give
is
credit
fun in
for-
places. But when it's bad, it's bad.
I mean, there's some stuff in it for sure.
For
But then there's
sure.
some really good individual scenes that are like really good.
That kind of makes
Like
you like,
that,
okay, like it's hard to hate it, but I want to
Like-
hate it, but there's good scenes.
Like that whole attack on the car with Lindsay, like Kyle Richards, reprising her role from like from Halloween, and like that whole scene is really good. I think the last 15 minutes or so are pretty good, like with the stuff with the granddaughter in the house and her boyfriend. Like when he kills her boyfriend,
Kills the boyfriend.
he's-
Oh, man, that's a
who's
good
pretty much
scene.
already dead, and he just had insult to injury, just walking
I
by him and
was-
like turning around and just like and just stopping him down. I
Yeah,
was like, yeah, this is hilarious.
that was
it's like-
awesome. I laughed in a good way.
And I even like the whole like townspeople like attacking him. I mean, I got really confused by the end of it, like what they were trying to say
that
about Michael Myers.
Scene was shot really
'cause-
terribly, I thought.
It took them all
how
out
he
eventually.
kills- and like it's just shot so weirdly. You just get like close-ups of him butchering them instead of like if we had got like a one take, for instance, would have been really cool. But filmed really weird. Could have been awesome.
And I don't know if I can dive into the teleportation and killing Judy Greer at the end of that.
Yeah,
I don't know how he got back, how he got back in the house. And,
well, I mean, he is to an extent supernatural. So I mean, it's inconsistent in terms of like his ability, but I guess it's nuanced enough that it didn't really bother me too much. And I'm just like, I was like, okay, good. At least he kills somebody of significance. Yeah.
So that was the one thing. So I did like Judy Greer in 2018. I didn't love her because I was like, oh, she's annoying. But that was like the part.
Oh,
right?
I thought she was annoying too.
That was the role. And then towards the end, of course, in the end, she has the whole like gotcha thing with the shotgun. I was like, all right, you made up for like a little bit, like all that stuff. By the time you get to the second one, she is better, and because she's finally accepted like what is happening to them.
Right.
And I did respect, because we talked about that with Scream 6. I respected that they took one important person out of the three. If they were going to kill, I didn't want them to kill Laurie, of course. And I kind of figured when they didn't, she didn't really live up to this, but I really thought the granddaughter was going to be kind of another Laurie Strode, because they really set her up that way in the 2018 movie.
Yeah.
To be like her grandmother was when she was younger. But I did love that they killed someone else that was important. When we saw it for the first time at Beyond Fest, everyone was pissed off because they liked her by the end of the movie. But I thought it was necessary. So
I agree it was necessary. Had to take somebody out. What I think would have been a cool approach would have been to him, because we know we have Laurie as like the grandmother, and then she has a daughter, which was Judy Greer. And what was the name of her again? The character?
Why am I?
I wasn't sure if we brought it up or not. Anyway, but Judy Greer as Laurie's daughter, and then Allison, the granddaughter.
Karen.
Karen. Oh my God, how could we forget that? She is a Karen.
Yeah.
I thought it would be cool for Michael to like end kills with killing Allison, even though she's kind of set up as like the main of that trilogy. So I get why they didn't. But if he had started working his way up the bloodline to Laurie and then them have the face off in the last movie for him to defeat him, I think that would have been a much cooler approach. Kind of like he's working his way up to her, because he's had some years of not being able to because he's as established in the other Halloweens. He's her brother, and for whatever reason, trying to take her out. So it would for him to go through the bloodline. But whatever, I'm not complaining that much. But I still got to see ends before I make up my mind.
I will say I forgot. I mean, even the stuff with the boyfriend, that was cool. I did love, because it just shows how badass Michael Myers is in that scene where she comes out with the gun and she tries to shoot him and he like knocks it away. She misses, and then she has the knife and she starts just stabbing him over and over again. And it does like nothing. To him, and he basically grabs her again and like just throws her down the stairs, and then she like, I don't know, she breaks her ankle or something, like something cracks when she hits the ground. And it's just a series of like, dude, this dude is like, there's like no stopping this guy like whatsoever. But I do like with those characters too, they show that they can hold her own. Like she wasn't like a completely like innocent, she could do. It just didn't live up, I guess, for a lot of people, and I can see that. I mean, with those characters, what they should have been.
It's also there's some inconsistency that bothers me in Kill. Like when you think about the original, like Laurie like incapacitates him with a coat hanger in the eye, and like now he's just taking like literally anything that's thrown at him.
Throat.
Exactly. And but so it kind of just bothers me that way. But I don't know. There's just it's a mixed bag, that series. So bottom line being, whatever they do with whoever buys the rights, they have
Yeah.
some big shoes to fill and a lot of expectations to be met. So I would not be envious of whatever studio head is in charge of that zoo.
I agree. I guess that's a good thing to set it up because we were just talking about like the women. I thought when I was approaching this, I was like, was I going to bring up something about the whole concept of the final girl? But I wanted to bring this up too because I hear this a lot about horror movies. Do you think that horror movies, like some critics think they are misogynistic and kind of demeaning towards women? Or do you think because by the end of the movie, the person that is usually the survivor is a strong female lead, so shouldn't that show some level of that the movie is empowering women in some way?
I feel that some movies do it better than others. Like there's too many to just say that it's like a blanket statement. Like, yeah, definitely some movies out there portray females in a negative way and don't give them the time to empower them. But of course, it's such a steady trope in horror that, yeah, like you can definitely glean that the horror, I think one way or another, I feel like the horror franchise definitely skewed towards women in terms of like the final girl being, you just associate them more with like a female presence in the end. I guess it really comes down to like, and there'd be tons of examples that if I had prepared an answer, I would have liked to touch on, but tons that do a terrible job in how they handle their female characters. Not that I think he does a terrible job, but one that comes to mind, like Rob Zombie across most of his like horror movies, like just is very crude of women. Is like not shying away from like violence depicted against women, which I don't think like as a whole obviously is a terrible thing, but in terms of movies, I think that boundary is a little bit more skewed, not as solid because it's art, it's a picture, you're telling a story, and nothing should really be off limits to an extent, unless you get into movies like a Serbian film and all that good stuff. But I don't think I feel like one way or another. It really depends. Like you can have that conversation about a particular franchise or movie or director, but not one way or another do I feel that way. There was another part of what you asked in that question that I wanted to touch on that I've lost my train of thought on.
Do I think they're inherently misogynist, like horror movies?
I also think there are a lot of examples where when that is part of the discourse, like a particular movie and its depiction of women, be it misogynistic or that they're incapable or inferior, I think there's plenty of examples of people reaching and sort of like looking for stuff that isn't necessarily there, which is the case with anything. Like you're going to have multiple opinions on what's being depicted in any given piece of art, in this case, like a movie.
Right.
But I don't think anything's set in stone. There's definitely some clear examples of that I couldn't really think off the top of my head. That will probably come to me. But yeah,
I'm glad that you mentioned the Rob Zombie thing because like my issue with, I'm just going to use Halloween as an example again.
Right.
His depiction of Laurie across two movies. I mean, I guess I get it in the second one because she's dealing with trauma and like there's that. But in the 2007 movie. The 2007 movie, she's no different from her two friends. So like they are all kind of annoyingly like
helpless, crybaby, screaming,
and like they're very. And then so like the key difference between Laurie and Carpenter's movie and her friends is she was clearly different from her two best friends. Like she was, and not to say that her two best friends were terrible because Annie's funny and Linda's funny, but their priorities were in a different place, right? They were all about boys and drinking and doing all that stuff, and Laurie wasn't.
Exactly.
Laurie was, for lack of a better word or term, like a good girl, like compared to the other two.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is what made her stand out. And like John Carpenter, I guess, was asked, like, because they always talk about like, well, the whole concept of like, oh, if you have sex in a horror film, you die. And is that what you're trying to say? If you're promiscuous in a horror film, you die. And he's always been like
that trope.
well, he did, but he's like, that's not the answer though. He was like, Laurie isn't surviving because she's not having sex. She is paying attention to things more compared to her friends who are preoccupied,
she's resourceful,
doing other things. They are preoccupied by other facts of life and other things that they're doing, and she isn't. And it's not the concept of like these characters are dying because they're promiscuous. They're just not paying attention. And I think people want a bigger, deeper meaning to that. And there are some scholars that still think that there are some horror writers that punish women in these movies because they're being promiscuous, but like at the end of the day, I think you do have by the end of it, it's usually a strong female lead that wins
Right.
over over evil at the end of the day. I mean, if you look at something like Scream, if you just want to, even if you don't want to talk about the fifth one, if you just go to the 4 with Sydney, that is a clear arc from like 1 to 4 where you're watching this girl grow from a teenager into a woman, and she goes from like being a victim of her circumstances to taking control of them and being able to not be a victim. So like that is a testament of like strong female character in a horror film. I think another underrated one, like Ashley Lawrence in Hellraiser. She doesn't have a lot to do, but she's not just there to, kind of be window dressing. Like she's more like she is strong, and that's important too. And I think what kind of gets skewed here too is that you have like the Friday the 13th movies where a lot of the girls in the movies are, they're there to get naked, they're there to die. That's the kind of like how those movies are.
Exactly.
Movies exist.
Coming back to like there's movies that do it better than others, and some definitely lean that way, and some there's more of more to be said, like in Carpenter's case.
But even their final girl tends to be resourceful and smart. In the first one, Alice is resourceful and smart. A lot of people, part 2, Amy Steele's a fan favorite final girl in that franchise. She's resourceful and very smart. She's the one in that second one that actually uses the psychology of like pretending to be Jason's mother to like confuse him and stuff. So there's like there's not every character in those movies aren't. I mean, I just like an indie. I guess you ever think about it like an indie friend group. There's gonna be certain types of people in the group, and I think that's what these movies try to represent. Sometimes is that there are different walks of life here, and I don't think that most of them are trying to say anything about women in particular. And we kind of talked about this with Wolf Creek because like Robert Ebert had issues with how the violence against women in that movie, and I think it's kind of missing the point. But also you're open to interpretation, your own opinion.
Absolutely.
That is. I've never, even at a young age, I never viewed them as something that was completely demeaning to women, because I think at the end of the day, like you have that final girl that's there usually.
Right. Well, even if that wasn't the case, I don't think I would look at movies that way. Like you have your antagonist who's there to kill as many of the protagonists as possible, and regardless of the gender of those people, like there's going to be violence committed, and some of them are going to die. And I don't really think it's ever been motivated against one or the other. That's never how I've looked at it. I just wanted to touch on like what you'd said about the point of like how some directors punish like their female characters for having sex. What I always like gleaned more about that, and like certainly like there's franchises and specific movies that that might be more apparent of a theme in, like the Friday the 13th, for example. I've always looked at it, and I kind of thought of this like rewatching Freddy versus Jason recently, and even the original Halloween. I think it just really, when you have your characters like engage in sex and like right after, it's just more of a state of vulnerability, like where their guard is down. That's maybe why we see so much of that trope, or so many characters die during or just after having sex in a horror movie, because their guard is down, because they're vulnerable. It's just it's like low hanging fruit, more so than let's punish these characters because they're being promiscuous. Sure, that definitely was probably more of a prevalent theme in like the 70s, where that was so taboo, and maybe the 80s or the 60s more so back then. But I think that it has evolved over horror cinema, like the legacy of that genre, and it's not so black and white.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's some of the best horror movies too. I mean, like if you're looking at Halloween, if you're looking at Nightmare on Elm Street, like all these characters are very smart, on top of the fact, like they're resourceful. They're not just there to be vulnerable. I mean, there is a vulnerability there that like, I think that's why the sense of they're in danger kind of frightens the audience, but then eventually they kind of rise up against that. Like I always loved the ending of Nightmare on Elm Street, where she realizes what she has to do to get rid of him. Like what she has, like I all this fear, all this power, like I'm taking it back, and and then demanding what she wants back from him. Like I want my mother and my friends again. Like, and like I think that's such a smart. Now the overall ending of that movie with the whole like grabbing the mom from the window, I think that ruins that. But like the overall, I think Wes Craven's button on that, because I think that's a studio button at the end of the movie.
Certainly, without a doubt.
Like Wes Craven's button on that says a lot, and I think having her realize that at the end, like, almost like, this is like, I'm not fighting with you anymore. And then like, this is, he practically raises up behind her to like finish her off. And then she's kind of like, no, this is it. Like, I'm taking back every ounce of power that I gave you. And that's how he lives. And then, of course, they've carried that on through the other movies too. That's how he really thrives on that fear and all that. So I think, I don't like,
it's a great question.
Maybe I think maybe you can like you can find it, and there might be a writer or director that did approach it that way and had something very negative to say about women. But I think overall, I think it's a genre that respects them in the way. I mean, there are some horror actresses that have said that they've never felt more empowered than when they were in a horror movie. So I think that has a lot to do with it too. I mean, they write really strong, usually female characters, and then not everyone needs to be like the lead. There is going to be that one that's just a flighty friend that dies. There's also like the dumb jock dude that dies too. Like, a lot of people don't really say anything about that either. Exactly. And then and then occasionally you get the final guy in some movies. It's rare, but like some horror movies do end with like a male protagonist at the end surviving. And
Evil Dead,
those movies get studied a lot too about what they mean about having like a final guy instead of Nightmare on Elm Street 2 has a lot more layers,
right? Than a couple of the Friday the 13th, right, with Tommy Jarvis like across three of them. There's a lot to be said about that trope, and I do kind of like when they do break away from it. Like, it's interesting to have a final guy at the end, because I think the concept of having a guy is like, oh, like he could easily take out so and so, but like they set things up when there is a final dude to where it wouldn't be that easy for them to do it. And then it kind of breaks away from the norm to like, instead of having a final girl, you have like a guy that survives at the end of it. But yeah, it's really, I mean, a lot of these things get asked a lot, and even when you have directors that dismiss it as like, well, that's not what I was trying to do, you still have people that study these movies that are like, no, there's no way you can't tell me that they're not punching women for this, and like, sex is bad, like, that kind of, I mean, of course, I mean, they make fun of it in Scream, like, if you want to survive a horror movie, you can never have sex. But, but it's not the act that is killing them. It's the fact that, like you said, they're distracted. Their guard is down. It's not about the act itself. Exactly. That is vulnerability sort of thing. And that you can have that conversation and how that relates to women in particular as well. But I got to give praise, and by no means the first time on this podcast because you guys covered it, but for to It Follows for covering that particular topic and sex in horror movies and its implications and whatnot too. So I'm rewatching that too. Yeah. In a very smart way too. They tell the exactly in a more modern time setting. But yeah. I would. God, another thing I might throw to the listeners is ask them how they feel about, that's
how women are treated
question.
in these movies. I think just because I've seen so many examples of like in any horror movie where it's just like a strong female lead that makes it towards the end, and she's not just a pretty face, and they're not just relying on that to like get her through the whole movie. Like, I think that's why. I mean, I've had friends who just like that. Those characters mean a lot to them. Like especially a lot of girls that watch these movies. A lot of my friends who are gay, lesbian, who watch these movies too. Like they identify with these characters a lot more. And that's why a lot of them like horror movies, because like usually usually the lead at the end is someone's like a little bit misunderstood, not quite like the popular person, like a little, little
an
left
underdog.
of center, an underdog, and like there's a lot to be said about, and to have that person to mostly be a female and be underestimated, and then prove that she shouldn't be underestimated. I think that genre probably more than any of them showcases them in a light that is much stronger than maybe other genres do. Sometimes,
for the most part, I definitely can agree with that. And I think it's a fantastic talking point too.
And that was us giving 15 minutes to a very big topic, but I just like
one that deserves discussion too, and something we haven't really touched on before. So I think that was fantastic. I like this theme of pitching different sort of questions like that to each other too, whether it be something about a particular director or just a theme in horror. Something we can expect more of from these episodes in these particular months too, which I really enjoy talking about, just because that's the stuff that we love. It's our bread and butter.
It's interesting to think about. And like probably one of those things too, when this is over, like we're done recording today. I'm like, oh, I should have brought that up. And then like maybe I might bring it up the next time we record.
Yeah, exactly. Like, by the way, before we get too into things, I had to keep reiterating on this point from last episode. I think about that all the time. I'm like, damn it, why didn't I think of this? The human brain is so annoying for that.
Yeah, for sure. But we'll definitely have another episode like this where it's
no
much
doubt
movie focused.
Exactly.
But
on that note, though, maybe in a little bit more lighthearted tone, because this is one of the questions that you pitched, but I was curious, what was the first, or I guess, what's your earliest memory of like a horror movie that you'd watched, or like what would you consider the first horror movie that you watched, or if there's several? Because some of my memories, I can't tell what was first.
So it would be Halloween, and I know Gremlins isn't really considered a horror movie, but it was scary to me when I was a kid.
As a kid, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Gremlins was one of them, and Halloween was pretty. They were around the same time, and I was pretty young. I always mentioned Hellraiser being 7 or 8. But
yeah, I remember you saying that on an earlier episode.
I saw Halloween when I was like 5, and like so that was very young. I think it would be like Halloween, Gremlins, Child's Play, Hellraiser, were like the first few. I saw Nightmare on Elm Street surprisingly late. I was like early teens. I was like 13, 14 when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street.
Gremlins was a movie that I only came to appreciate in adulthood. I've only seen it for the first time 2 years ago.
Oh,
I never saw it growing up. I saw clips,
and a Christmas movie.
Because I'm tough with Christmas movies, so that would be one that I set aside. I watched it the last 2 Christmases actually.
Yeah,
and really like the movie.
What would be yours?
Again, like the structure of my memories, like I don't know what is what. One of the earlier examples is Alien versus Predator. I remember that being on like Spike, the TV channel, like just watching that on cable channel with my dad growing up. I would have been like as young as I can remember. Some of my earliest memories. So yeah, the Alien versus Predator probably would be the first one. But in 2007, when I Am Legend came out, I'm 9 at that point, or maybe 8, depending on the time of the year. That was one of at least like the first theatrical horror movies that I'd seen, and one of the few that gave me nightmares. I remember waking up that night and being terrified of those creatures. And actually, I've read the book since, and the book is fantastic too. It's a little bit different. They're more like traditional vampires in Richard Matheson's novel, but very, very good read too for those that like the movie. And I've always had this deep appreciation and sort of I kind of give like a pass to Alien versus Predator because I've recognized its quality as a movie is issues over the years is not. I don't look at it with the rose-colored glasses I did when I was a kid. Now, looking at it from like more of an analytical point of view, but I still give it the pass. Like it's still a movie that means a lot to me because of when I'd seen it and how often. Because I saw it a lot growing up too. It was just one of those movies I had my hands on, like on a DVD, and then. Funny enough, another one, and this is one that I would love to talk about whenever the timing is appropriate. I'm sure we won't get to it this year, but it would fit the theme of spooky season. But have you ever seen, maybe we've talked about it before, but you ever see 2005's Doom with The Rock?
Yeah, with The Rock. Yeah.
I'll never forget. Like, it's one of those memories I have where I don't know if it's like manufactured a little bit or if it's like genuine. It's like that far back, but that movie came out in 2005. So I think it was that Christmas, some relative that probably didn't know me that well just gifted me that. Like it was under the tree at Christmas. I remember unwrapping that DVD, and there's no way my parents got that. And I've had that DVD. It's one of my earliest DVDs I'd ever collected, and I've seen it with Cam actually because we grew up together probably a million times. And definitely a horror movie, but saw that way too young. That movie's like 18A. Like it is super violent and gory and full of profanity. But I don't look at it as like a traditional horror movie, even though it has all those elements, and the video game it's adapted from is fucking terrifying too. But another one of the earlier examples, and I have a lot of love for that movie just because of that youthful rose-colored glasses I look at it with. But I would love to deep dive that sometime too. I was actually when we did Killer Joe, that was a front runner for what I was going to pick.
Oh, that would have been much different.
Oh, it would have been for sure. Yeah,
that would have been funny. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so that was my early ones. There were some good ones in the beginning, but way too young to watch them.
There's some that I wish I had seen when I was younger because I think I would appreciate them more because I don't know what it is about when you see a movie, but there's some movies that I know that are classics or that a lot of people love that I just get too late and I'm like, it doesn't resonate with me. And I really wish I'd seen them, but that's why I try to get as many first time watches in as possible just so I can see them the younger the better, I guess. sometimes. I don't know if
sure.
that's a phenomenon, but yeah.
Yep. You got another one, or you want me to throw one?
Oh, I was hoping you would throw one, but unless we get to the strike news.
Okay. All right, I got you. Only because
Okay.
we talked about the final girl thing. I will say, the one that says you're in a horror movie. Are you the final girl, the first to die, the comic relief, the skeptic, the smart one, or the killer?
Ooh, I mean, I want or the killer. Oh, that's a good option. I can't really go with that. Depending on the movie, there's a lot of cool, I guess, like horror movie villains. I think are neat, but I want to go with the smart one, but that's too like cliche. Because having all this knowledge, if you will, of horror movies and how they operate, you'd think that if you knew that you were in one, you could get out of it. But I think I would be somewhere between the comic relief and maybe the first to die. Probably just being realistic. The skeptic. The skeptic.
So
that's what I meant to say.
I could be the skeptic because, like, it's funny because when I watch horror movies, the one thing that frustrates me is when there's clearly something wrong going on.
All this evidence is in front of the character and they refuse.
And then there's always that one character's like, oh, I just don't know. You're driving yourself crazy. It's just this house, or like something stupid like that. And you're like, come on. Like, there's so many examples of what's going on. So it's
easy to see that as a viewer. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I would just like, you might throw like, I think this place is haunted. I'd be like, you know what? Let's look.
You're probably right. Yeah. Why test fate? Like you said last episode.
I think I would be comic relief or first to die.
Yeah. Comic relief. I'm rarely too serious unless the situation necessarily calls for it, but I can find the humor in anything, and so I'm usually cracking jokes.
Both tend to be like black people things, so there we go.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. You'd be dynamite in a horror movie.
I don't know. I mean, and when I say first to die, I mean I don't think I'd be good. Like, I would hope I would be able to escape certain situations like that, but like you're in dire kind of straits. I mean, I don't know. It just depends on what that situation is. But I wouldn't be the killer. I'm not. None of us are evil on here, and that wouldn't be the skeptic either, because I would most likely believe anything you threw at me.
For sure. So for how I operate, I usually try and find the most logical answer in things. So especially when it comes to something like paranormal or horror related, that stuff that I don't necessarily tend to believe in very strongly in the real world, I feel like I would just look for more logical answers before I got on board. So that's why I can see myself being a skeptic character, but that's not to say I don't believe in anything. I'm not a complete stick in the mud, but that's a great little mental exercise. I feel like that would be a good personality question, in a group of like an icebreaker.
No, that would be a good one. I think that would be good. If all your friends are like, no, you'd be the first to die. I'm like, well, thanks.
Yeah, and to have to pick for other people to assign that role to your friends would be a fun little exercise.
Yep. That was a good one. I'm glad we could cut those together for some reels. Well, it's funny that we both were like, comic relief for first to die. Are you? Yeah.
And skeptical a little bit to me for sure.
It's a little bit skeptical.
I got to be a little practical. I would probably die in a horror movie. I can't say I'd get out of them all.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap this up with two things. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but we just had to mention it because it was a big part of the show for the last 146 days.
Is that how long it's been? Oh my God.
That's how long it was. The Writers Guild of America finally reached a tentative deal with the AMPTP, who represents the studios. The terms of said deal are not going to be revealed until after the WGA officially signs on the dotted line to approve the deal. But according to the people in charge of WGA West and WGA East, they said that the deal is exceptional and really represents what they want moving forward. So that's a very good sign.
Yes.
That a lot of people will be able to get back to work very soon. Now, here's some caveats. I heard because of wanting to send in solidarity with SAG, they necessarily don't want to get back to work until SAG gets their right deal too, which is fair.
That's a good move.
Once they went on strike, they stood in solidarity with the writers. So that makes sense. And I think they have leverage now to be like, hey, give us a similar deal to what you gave to the writers. So I think that might make things easy or for negotiations. And I hear they're meeting within a few days, SAG and the AMPTP. So
I would have killed to be a fly on that wall in that negotiating room, with all the execs and the representatives of the WGA. Man, I would have loved to know just how, who cracked. Obviously I'm sure we'll know in the coming days.
So we'll know exactly what they'll get. But I'm assuming it was like it had to do with. I'm sure they got a better cut with residuals in the streaming era, and I think the AI thing probably had to be addressed thoroughly.
Certainly.
So I think that is positive. Quickly, what you'll probably get back first is what you lost first. Late night TV, you'll probably come back first amongst the entertainment programs. Talk shows will be a close second, coming back right away. I think SNL is eyeing a return in October, but they won't have actors or actresses who are guests because they're a part of SAG. Because if they're still striking, they won't be able to do it. So you're going to see a lot of probably athletes trying to be funny on SNL.
Okay.
Those will be the first things to come back. But everyone can pick up their pens again and fire up their final drafts on their computers.
That's awesome.
I think that this is ending in a decent amount of time where it's going to be a shorter fall TV season, but you'll still get one shorter than normal though. And also, I think we're going to probably hear a lot in the coming weeks about a lot of the deals that were probably being negotiated for future projects ahead of the strike. So you might get a lot of news.
Okay, good.
Moving forward, like once this kind of is solidified, and
that might jeopardize our October a little bit.
We'll see. Take your time, guys. You're already gotten this far.
For our sake,
take your time.
Crazy though.
It's a good thing.
Oh, fantastic. I'm sure if it was any other time of the year, this would have been what we led this episode off with that news, right?
For sure.
Having covered it so much, but obviously we could not let you guys go without knowing that. Crazy though, 3 days short of 5 whole complete months. That's quite the tenure.
Yeah.
Because the 2007 and 8 strike was how many days?
Like 115. It was in the somewhere around there, I think.
Okay.
All right. And then the longest one's 148. So they were very close.
1 day shy?
They were really close to it.
Wow.
And there are some people online being like, well, we can say that it doesn't end until we sign it. But like I think everyone's looking at the end of it being like we struck a deal day 146. Well, day 146.
If you want to get technical.
Still a long time. A lot of people had to work for a really long time on this. So exciting that it's over. And just got now give SAG their proper deal, so you don't have to delay any more movies, and we can get people promoting their movies again. Some of us can start doing interviews again. That'd be great. That's a big part of the job. So I don't know.
Super
very happy
stuff.
for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Hopefully, hopefully the actors are next.
All right. Well, let's end this with some horror movie box office because Saw 10 is opening this weekend.
Right.
They've been marketing the hell out of it. The really clever marketing stuff they've been doing lately. A screening I'm going to is tomorrow. The embargo lists pretty early, so I think they're confident in what they have. Okay. So there's that. It's hard to compare
the place. Yeah, for marketing.
Now I'm going to say this: it's hard to compare the box office for the last because Spiral came out in the middle of the middle of the pandemic, and it was kind of like I saw it at the theater. That was like one of the first few movies I saw when everything reopened.
Okay, and I can't remember if we talked about that movie or not.
It's not really. Oh, I feel like I should watch it again. How I felt about it at the time was like it was okay.
Okay.
But that was an $8.7 million opening. But again, this was
hard to that's kind of doesn't count. I thought it was a piece of shit though, just for my take. I did not like Spiral at all. But
and then Jigsaw, I think, was the one right before that, 2017. Yes. That opened to $16.6 million on a $10 million budget. Grossed $38 million domestic and $102.9 million worldwide. Still was a hit. And it kind of brought it. There was that Saw final chapter that came out before that, and that was supposed to be the end of it. And then Jigsaw. This takes place between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 or something like that.
1 and 2, I think.
1 and 2. And they seem to be promoting it on like a more old school level. So, and if reviews are good, I feel like people are excited for it from what I can see. And it's coming out at the right time. It's like right at the beginning of spooky season.
It's a great time for that.
Oddly enough, it only gets like a week to itself because I think The Exorcist is opening next week on the 6th. So it really only has 1 week of horror movie box office to itself, but I think it's gonna go above Jigsaw like significantly. The 16.6 million. That was the last one. I'm not even counting Spiral as.
Yeah, it's hard to fuck that movie. I'm just curious what the target audience of this movie is, because like if it's taking place in between a movie that is 15, 16, 17 years old. So like I think a lot of the younger generation that probably knows what Saw is and are going just for the traps and the gory kills might not be able to like get the nuance of the story, but obviously there's the older audience that has grown up with these movies. It's going to be all about that, but I don't know who is going to really go to show. Like I'm expecting people to show up, but I'm curious the demographic that's really gonna make the bulk of this movie's box office money. But
I mean, I'm thinking that maybe this could get some of the older fans back in, who maybe like gave up on it.
Certainly,
I'm going with an even 30. That probably too high.
Okay,
I'm going with that $30 million. Yeah,
30. I like it.
Yeah,
that's ambitious. Watch you be totally right, because I'm gonna go lower. It's just a matter of how much. I want to go like I'm gonna give it like a 23. So that's a $7 million gap. I'm confident in it though. I agree with you. I think it's gonna do better than Jigsaw. I think the marketing has been spot on for this movie. The AMC parody ad
that was great.
Was awesome. How do they do that? How are they able to market that?
I think because it's parody, it's safe. I mean, I forgot what the exact rules are when it comes to like
I see.
spoofing something like that. But AMC did make the Saw official Twitter page take it down. But everyone else, but everyone had shared it at that point, so it was too late.
Right.
It was all over TikTok and everywhere else. So
no one's in like trouble for making that and putting that out there.
No one's in trouble. No.
Cool.
So yeah, 30 from me, 23 for you.
I guess we'll know next week, and then The Exorcist will be a fun one.
That'll be a fun one because I don't even know where to start with that.
Well, it'd be kind of fun to, I guess, compare it to 2018 Halloween's, just for David Gordon Green's.
That was like a $72 million opening. I don't see that.
Holy fuck! Okay, I don't know about
that. But we'll see.
Yeah,
we shall see.
Okay.
All right. Well, this is a fun episode. I know we did
talk basics a little bit.
Back to basics, but mostly horror movie related, other than the writer's strike. Right. We will be going back to. I don't know what guests we're gonna have yet. I've nailed down guests for Halloween 4, and I believe the Texas Chainsaw stuff.
Okay.
Still trying to narrow down one for The Exorcist and the fitting in the James Wan. Yeah. But The Exorcist will be. Oh, and then Hellraiser. I haven't done that yet either, but I'll figure it out.
We got lots of time.
But the Hellraiser one, the Exorcist one will be next because we are going to talk about the original the week that Exorcist Believer opens. So that will be our next Tales of Horror with a special guest. And hopefully we can fit one of these in there again too, that were just like this with just and kind of like just shooting the shit.
Exactly. I would really like that because it's been nice to go back to basics for a bit while still maintaining that theme of horror stuff. So yeah, I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about. Maybe now with the strike coming to a tentative end, or one of the strikes coming to a tentative end, that might give us some more news to squeeze in there too.
Probably
it'd be nice too if it's like some horror related news. Maybe we could combine some of that in the episodes, but still lots of good stuff to come out. And for those that were just listening, that maybe want to jump on an episode, there's still a couple slots there that are open for those of you maybe that were looking to jump in on a conversation. We got, I guess, stay tuned to the socials because we will put that up there for the episodes that we need a guest for, but still lots of time to join us for Back to the Blockbusters Tales of Horror series, continuing until October 31st. That sweet, sweet day.
Yep.
Yeah. Until then, I guess this has been episode 124. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in this week and listen to us chat about our favorite genre and just our favorite stuff in general. It's always a pleasure to have you guys join us for this. So yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. For those of you that are new, you guys can find us anywhere on our socials and wherever you guys get your podcasts at Back to the Blockbuster. For you iPhone users out there, make sure to download the playlist app on the iOS store. And until next time, guys, this has been Gaius and Jackson. Thanks a lot. Stay safe out there and enjoy your spooky season.